Welcome to our true story channel, 10-Minute Enigmas, where we take short, deep dives into both the dark side of humanity and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. In just 10 minutes, we unravel mysterious crimes, shocking twists, and tales of survival and strength. Today, we focus on the hinterkaifeck-mord-de, a profoundly disturbing case that has perplexed investigators for over a century. Deep in the Bavarian countryside of Germany, a remote farm stood, isolated from the rest of the world. But in 1922, this quiet farm became the site of one of the most chilling unsolved murder cases in history. 6 people, including 5 members of the Gruber family and their maid, were found brutally murdered on their own property. What makes this case even more disturbing is the eerie possibility that their killer or killers may have been living on the farm for days before the murders were discovered. The Hinterkaifeck tragedy remains one of Germany's darkest and most mysterious crimes. The Gruber family consisted of Andreas Gruber, the father, his wife Casilia, their daughter Victoria, and Victoria's 2 children, Casilia Jr., 7 years old, and Joseph, 2 years old. The family lived in a secluded farmhouse called Hinterkaifeck, surrounded by dense forests, making it difficult for anyone to access and easy to leave unnoticed. Victoria, Andreas's daughter, was also known to have been living with her parents after the death of her husband some years earlier. Just days before the murders, several strange events occurred on the farm. Andreas Gruber reported hearing footsteps in the attic, but when he investigated, he found nothing. He also discovered fresh footprints leading from the forest to the house, but there was no sign of who had made them. Even more disturbing, he found a set of house keys missing from the house. On another occasion, he found a newspaper on the house that none of them subscribed to. Nobody could explain how it got there. Andreas told some neighbors about the strange incidents, who urged him to contact the police and offered to help search the property. However, despite their concerns, he never reported the occurrences and the family continued with their routine. On the afternoon of Friday, March 31st, 1922, their former maid, who had left 6 months earlier, claiming to have also heard footsteps in the attic and convinced that the property was haunted, returned with her sister as a replacement maid. She left a short while later. The sister, Maria Baumgartner, moved her belongings into the small bedroom off the kitchen to begin her shift. She would never leave alive. The following day, the family's neighbors noticed something was off. People who dropped by at the farm, including coffee salesmen and others who stopped to sell or purchase items, found no one answered the door. On Sunday, the Grubers were not at church or seen around the village. The postman also noticed that the family had not picked up their mail. The young girl, Casilia, was also missing from school the following Monday and Tuesday. Finally, getting increasingly concerned, the neighbors went to check on them. But when they got there, what they found shocked them to their core and haunted them forever. The neighbors managed to enter the farm through the barn and recoiled at the sight. At the entrance, Andreas, his wife, their daughter and granddaughter, lay dead in a pile covered with loose straw. The bodies all had horrific disfiguring wounds to the head. Shortly afterwards, the maid, Maria, was found in the bedroom and the infant son, Joseph, all bludgeoned to death. The killings appeared to have been brutal, methodical, and without any signs of a struggle. But the most chilling detail came later. Autopsies revealed that all 6 people had been killed on Friday evening. Yet investigators discovered that after the murders, the killer or killers had lived on the farm for days. Neighbors reported that they heard sounds coming from the house on the night of the murders, but no one checked. They obviously thought it was the family. Smoke was seen from the chimney of the farmhouse over the weekend, indicating people were in residence as usual. It appeared that the intruder ate the Gruber family's food, fed the animals, and even tended to the livestock. Oddly enough, the farm dog was found in the premises, distressed but unharmed. For 3 days after the murders, the house remained undisturbed, while the killer lived there, appearing comfortable staying in the very place where the horrific crimes were committed. The investigation into the murders was extensive, but ultimately led to no answers. Burglary was quickly dismissed as the motive. since the killers had left behind cash and valuables. Several theories have been put forward over the years. Some believe the terrible murders were committed by an outsider, possibly someone with a personal vendetta. There were skeletons in the family closet which may or may not have had a bearing on the case. Andreas Gruber was known for his aggressive and brutal behavior, and had been convicted for sexual abuse of his own daughter, for which he'd served a year in prison. Dark rumors were rife that young Josef was his son as well as grandson. Others theorized that the killer was someone from the Gruber family's past, perhaps an estranged relative or a former worker. The estranged husband of Victoria, a man named Karl Gabriel, had reportedly been killed by a shell attack in France in 1914 during the First World War, but his body had never been recovered. People began to speculate about whether he had in fact died or not. Another popular theory suggests that the murderer was a former farmhand who had been dismissed by the family, but despite many suspects, no one was ever definitively linked to the crime. One of the most intriguing theories is that the killer was, in fact, someone who knew the Grubers well. In this respect, investigators focused on a man named Lorenz Schlittenbauer, a local farmer who was rumored to have had an affair with Victoria Gruber. Some believed that Schlittenbauer may have been enraged after being told that he might have fathered Victoria's younger child and needed to make alimony payments. However, there was no concrete evidence linking him to the murders, and Schlittenbauer himself died without ever being charged. Another suggestion was that the killer was someone who had been hiding in the attic for days, even months, before striking, someone with intimate knowledge of the house and the family's routine. To this day, no one has identified the perpetrator of the Hinterkaifeck murders. Despite multiple investigations, numerous suspects, and intense media attention, the case remains unsolved. The idea that the killer lived in the house, potentially hidden in the attic before, and then after the murders, undetected for days, continues to haunt investigators and true crime enthusiasts alike. Was the killer someone the family knew? Someone who was obviously comfortable enough to stay in the house with the bodies of the victims? Or was it a stranger, with a chilling plan that has never been fully understood? The site was permanently deserted following the horrific events. While no one wished to live there, people were eager to visit and witness the crime scene firsthand. Their presence became such a disturbance that a year following the murders, the authorities opted to demolish the entire area. Just before the demolition, workers discovered a blood-stained grub axe, also known as a mattock, concealed in the attic above the barn, which was confirmed as the murder weapon that had been inadvertently missed during the initial investigation. Today, over a century after the tragic events at Hinterkaifeck, all evidence of the crime scene has been eradicated. All that remains of one of Germany's most notorious unsolved cases is a memorial. This tragedy remains one of the most unsettling unsolved true crime cases that has continued to puzzle people around the world. And while the identity of the killer remains a haunting enigma, one thing is certain. The inherent human need for justice will always prevail, and the story of the Hinterkaifeck murders is far from forgotten.